There was a small town that prided itself on its elaborate Halloween traditions. Every year, the townspeople would decorate their homes with pumpkins, skeletons, and ghosts, while children roamed the streets, eager to fill their bags with candy. But there was one house on the edge of town that was always avoided. It stood at the end of a long, winding road, covered in ivy and decay. No one knew who lived there, and no one dared to knock on its door. The house belonged to an old man named Mr. Halloway, or at least that's what the few people who remembered him said. He had once been a regular part of the town, but after the sudden death of his wife and child many years ago, he withdrew into his house and was never seen again. On Halloween night, three teenagers, Danny, Lisa, and Mike, decided they were brave enough to approach the house. They had heard the stories. Some said the house was cursed. Others claimed that Mr. Rice Halloway still lived inside, waiting for someone foolish enough to disturb him. Driven by a mix of curiosity and the desire to prove themselves, they made a pact to knock on his door. When they arrived, the house loomed in the moonlight, casting long, crooked shadows. The air felt colder, and the wind howled through the dead trees. Despite their bravado, the three hesitated at the gate. "Come on," Danny said, trying to sound confident. "It's just an old house." They walked up the creaking steps to the front porch, the wood groaning beneath their weight. The door was massive, old oak with strange carvings along its edges. Mike raised his fist to knock, but before he could, the door slowly creaked open on its own. Inside, the house was dark, the air thick with the smell of dust and something rotten. A faint flickering light came from deeper within, as if from a candle. "Hello?" Lisa called, her voice trembling slightly. There was no answer. Against their better judgment, they stepped inside, the door closing behind them with a loud thud. They wandered through the narrow halls, feeling watched by the old portraits that lined the walls, portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow them with cold intensity. They reached a large room at the center of the house, where they found an old table set with rotting food and melted candles. But what caught their attention most was the figure seated at the head of the table. It was an old man, his skin pale and waxy, dressed in a moth-eaten suit. His eyes were open, staring blankly at the ceiling. His face was frozen in a twisted smile. Before they could scream, the figure moved. Slowly creaking like a door long forgotten, his head turned to face them. His smile widened, revealing blackened teeth. "Welcome," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "I've been expecting you." The teenagers backed away, but the air grew heavy around them. The shadows in the room seemed to thicken and stretch, creeping closer to them. The house groaned, and the walls seemed to pulse as if they were alive. Lisa was the first to run, but the moment she reached the door, it slammed shut, trapping them inside. The old man stood, impossibly tall now, his limbs stretching unnaturally long as he moved toward them. "You're too late," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Once you enter my home, you never leave." The candles flickered out, plunging them into darkness. All that remained were the sounds of their frantic breathing and the slow, deliberate footsteps of Mr. Halloway closing in. No one ever saw the three teenagers again, and the house at the end of the road remains abandoned to this day. But sometimes on Halloween night, you can still hear faint knocking from inside, as if someone or something wants to be let out.